At Sunday dinner, my son took one bite. Then his hand began to tremble. The room spun slow like syrup sliding down cracked porcelain. He didn't cry, just looked at me, eyes wide, glassy, frightened. He collapsed forward. His tablet bag slipped from his chair, a soft thud, not loud, but final. Everyone shouted. My mother said, "He's dramatic, that's what you get for babying him." But I reached into his bag, pulled the tablet out, and tapped a folder marked Beta 3. A boy's voice whispered, "If you're hearing this, please believe me." I did. And what I heard next made the whole house go silent. Would you have listened or walked away? Where are you listening from today? Subscribe for more. They say Sunday dinners hold families together, but mine were performance nights. I'm Rowena Lee, nurse, single mom. I live in Windermere Point, a snowy little town where everyone still waves, and nobody asks what happens behind closed doors. My mother, Francesca Lee, was once the most respected teacher in town. She taught 3 generations. Sharp tongue, ironed blouses, perfect posture even while sitting. People called her a treasure. I called her mother because mom never quite fit. Every Sunday she hosted dinner, mandatory. Roast beef, green beans, lemon pie, same table, same clock, same smile. And for a while, I convinced myself it was normal. I work long hours, emergency trauma unit, the kind of job that trains you to read people. In 5 seconds or less, I can spot a concussion, a silent panic attack, even when someone's pretending they're fine. Except I couldn't see what was happening to my own son. Jonas, 13, brown curls, big thoughtful eyes. He builds radios from scrap, reads about black holes, sleeps with the window cracked, even in the middle of a snowstorm. He was never loud, but he used to hum, used to narrate everything like it was a space documentary, used to laugh when the dog barked at the microwave. Used to, until he started spending weekends at my mother's. It began with me needing help. Double shifts. He was too old for babysitters, too young to be alone. Francesca offered. I raised 2 kids while teaching full-time, she said. He'll learn discipline, not like this modern fluff parenting. I said yes because I wanted to believe. She meant well. The first time he came back, he had a scratch on his forearm. Said it was from the garage. I didn't question it. Next time he was quiet, didn't touch his favorite cereal, said it tasted funny. Third time, he drew something. A dark house, no windows, and one word above the door, silence. I asked what it was. He shrugged. Someplace quiet. Then he tore it up. I brought it up with my mother. She scoffed. He's overly sensitive, Rowena. Kids today, they break if you breathe wrong. And I believed her. Because she'd said the same things to me all my life. You cry too easily. You imagine things. You make people uncomfortable. I'd learned to doubt my own gut so well that when Jonas began to change, I thought the problem was me. He started asking strange questions. Mom, if someone hurts you but says it's for your good, is it still love? Or if you sit still enough, can your heart go invisible? I chalked it up to hormones, to books he was reading, to me, overthinking, until the cough started, always after Sunday dinner, always the same dry, raspy sound, like something scratching its way out. I asked my mom. She waved it off. Dust, or he's faking it for attention. Then came the cookies. He loved chocolate chip. But one night, he clutched his stomach and said, "It feels like my throat has spikes." I checked the pantry. The cookie bag said it contained traces of walnuts. He's allergic. I confronted her. She swore up and down. I made them from scratch. No nuts. Then he's exaggerating. He needs boundaries. You baby him too much. I stood there holding my son's crumpled drawing in one hand, his medication chart in the other, and I said nothing. Because that's how my family worked. Keep the peace. Don't embarrass. Smile through it. Jonas never complained, not once. But he started recording things, little audio notes. I'd walk past his room and hear him whispering into his tablet. Not stories, not songs. Just observations. She closed the door harder today. She said I breathed too loud. I didn't cry this time. I didn't know what to do, so I did what I'd always done. I let it be. I prayed I was wrong, that I was overreacting, that he'd grow out of it. But one Sunday night, he looked at me across the table and said, "Mom, if I disappear, would you believe I didn't just fade away on purpose?" That line still echoes, because I didn't answer him. Not then. The next morning, he packed his hoodie even though it was warm, slipped his tablet into the front pocket, didn't say a word. I asked if he wanted cereal. He shook his head. No appetite. At the door, I kissed his forehead. His skin felt clammy. "Text me if you need anything," I said. He looked up, paused, then whispered, "I just need you to believe me." That sentence landed like a stone in my chest, but I smiled like always, because that's what we were trained to do. That Sunday, I had to work a half shift, emergency staffing, short-handed again. Jonas was already at my mom's. I called to check in. She answered on speaker, her voice too chipper. "He's fine, Rowena. Reading some book with dragons. Though he did say the cookies were itchy." She laughed. "He's such a little actor." My fingers clenched. "Did you give him anything with nuts?" "No, just a store-bought mix." I checked the label. Something in her tone felt performative, like she wasn't talking to me, like she was proving something. That night, Jonas didn't answer my texts. At 10:43, I got one line back. "If you don't hear from me, check folder beta 3. My blood went cold. I called immediately, straight to voicemail. I told myself he was asleep, told myself the charger died, told myself it was nothing. The next morning, he came home with red marks on his neck. He said they were from a wool scarf. It was May. I asked, "Did something happen?" He shrugged. "She got mad because I dropped a glass." I asked again, "Did she touch you?" He shook his head. "No, just her voice." I stood in that kitchen, holding a glass of orange juice, watching it tremble in my own hand. Later that night, while folding laundry, I found something tucked in the hoodie's pocket. A note. "Mom, don't listen to what she says about me. Listen to what she says when I'm not talking." I sat down hard, hands shaking. I unlocked the tablet. Inside there were 3 folders. The last one, beta 3, password protected. I tried his birthday, didn't work. Then I typed mine. It opened. 17 audio files, dated, labeled, all from Sunday evenings. I played the first one. It started with dishes clinking, then her voice. "Cold, precise. You think staying quiet makes you innocent, it makes you weak." Jonas didn't respond. Then came the sound of footsteps, a chair scraping. "Her again, I don't care what your mother says. You're not special. You're a glitch." I stopped the recording. My hands were sweating, stomach twisting. I wasn't ready, not yet. But the folder was real, and he'd been building it for weeks. On Monday, I sent him to school, and I went to the pharmacy. I picked up a new EpiPen and allergy testing strips, just in case. I also bought a fireproof USB and copied the entire folder onto it. That night, Jonas didn't ask for dinner. He just sat at the table, looking at me, waiting. I finally said I opened beta 3. His eyes welled, but he didn't cry. He nodded. "I didn't want to get her in trouble," he said. "I just needed to prove I wasn't crazy." I reached across the table, took his hand, held it. And for the first time in weeks, he let me. I listened to the second recording after he went to bed. I couldn't stop myself. The file began with laughter hers, fake, forced. Then came this "he still wets the bed, you know." Even at 13, pitiful, really. My stomach twisted. Then Jonas's voice, soft, barely audible. "I don't. Francesca, sharp. I didn't ask you." Silence, then the sound of glass hitting a countertop. She whispered something next, but the mic caught it anyway. You hum when you're nervous. Do you realize how pathetic that sounds? I could fix you, you know, but your mother keeps breaking you. I closed the tablet. My hand covered my mouth. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't tough love. This was deliberate. I remembered the time Jonas came home and hummed under his breath for hours, then stopped. Cold. Now I knew why. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the clinic, scheduled Jonas for a full psychological evaluation, booked a therapy consultation. Then I called my mom. We need to talk, I said. She sniffed. About what? I paused. About what you've been saying to him. A beat, then that familiar chuckle. Oh, come on, Rowena. I've raised kids longer than you've been alive. You let that boy coddle himself into fragility. He needs spine, not softness. I clenched my jaw. He's recording you. Silence. Then, excuse me. He's been recording your conversations. I've heard them. All of them. Another pause, then her voice dropped low, sharp, like broken glass. Be very careful, Rowena. If you let a child turn against his elders, don't blame me when he learns to lie. And just like that, she hung up. That week, Jonas started drawing again. Not the black house, not silence. This time, a clock. No numbers, just marks, and a red hand frozen at 6:12. I asked what it meant. He said, that's when she makes me eat the cookie. I checked the timestamp. One of the recordings ended at exactly 6:12 p.m. That Sunday, I told Jonas I'd pick him up early. He nodded, didn't ask why, just packed his tablet, then looked at me and said, folders updated. I drove the whole way, clenching the steering wheel. When I pulled up, I didn't honk. I walked to the front door, quiet, listened. From the hallway, I heard her voice, angry. And you think whispering into that thing makes you brave? You're just a scared little bug. And bugs get squashed. I didn't knock. I opened the door. Jonas sat at the table, hands folded, eyes low. Francesca turned, startled, but only for a second. Oh, you're early. Her voice turned sweet, too sweet. I was just telling him to sit up straight. I walked over, knelt beside Jonas, touched his hand. It was cold. He didn't look at me. I glanced at the tablet, still recording, still glowing red. I turned to her. You're not alone in this house, and neither is he. She laughed. The boy is manipulating you. You always were easy to guilt. No, I said. For the first time, I'm finally listening. I took Jonas's bag, helped him into his jacket. As we walked out, she called after me. You'll regret this. Jonas didn't flinch, didn't turn around, but when we got to the car, he whispered, she's scared now. That night, he didn't eat, didn't sleep, but he updated the folder one last time. One new file, one word in the title. Ye ready. Sunday came. I told him he didn't have to go. He looked at me for a long time, then said, I want to finish it. He packed his hoodie, slipped the tablet into the front pocket, checked the battery twice. At the door, I knelt down, tied his shoelace slowly. You don't yet have to prove anything to me, I whispered. He didn't answer, just hugged me tighter than usual, then walked out to the car with his shoulders square. At 4:36 p.m., my phone buzzed. One text from Jonas. It's starting. I put my keys down, didn't reply, didn't breathe. Just stared at the screen, counting minutes. I drove to the house at 6 sharp. She'd invited the whole family that day, said it was important. When I walked in, the room smelled like lemon pie. Jonas sat at the far end of the table, his hoodie still on, tablet zipped shut in the pocket. Francesca was in rare form, smiling, pouring wine. touching everyone's shoulder just long enough to claim ownership. She served the cookies last, pushed one onto Jonas's plate. Still warm, she said sweetly, your favorite. Jonas stared at it, then picked it up and took one bite. Slow, deliberate. I moved to stop him, but he shook his head. I'm okay, he said, then looked me straight in the eye. That's when I saw it. The faint swelling around his lips, the tremble in his fingers. He dropped the cookie, reached under the table. His hand hovered over the tablet, then fell limp, and he slumped forward, face hitting the plate with a dull thud. Gasps, screams, the table erupted. Someone shouted, "Is he choking?" I ran to him, checked his pulse, still there, faint. Francesca hovered behind me. Oh, he always does this. It's just another one of his little performances. I looked up at her. You fed him walnuts, didn't you? She raised her eyebrows, scoffed. No, that's ridiculous. He probably made it up to get attention. I pulled the tablet out of his hoodie, opened it. Folder Beta 3, one new file. Time-stamped, 6:12 p.m. I tapped it. The room went silent. Her voice filled the air, clear, cold, undeniable. He keeps faking reactions, so let's see what one real one feels like. A gasp, then her laugh, low, cruel. What's the worst that could happen? A little fear never killed anyone. Someone dropped a fork. My uncle stood up, shaky. That's not... She didn't... I turned the volume up. Then came Jonas's voice, soft, fading. I'm scared. Then silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping, a plate moving. Then her voice again. I told you not to hum. I paused the recording. No one moved. Jonas groaned, eyes fluttered open. I crouched beside him. I've got you, I whispered. You're safe. He looked past me, to Francesca. She didn't speak. She didn't blink, but her hands were shaking. Jonas reached for the tablet, pressed stop. Then he whispered, she always said silence was power. I gave her some. And the room stayed silent. We left the house before dessert. Jonas leaned into me in the car, eyes closed, breathing shallow. At the ER, I handed us his allergy card. The nurse glanced at the readings. Another walnut reaction. I nodded, tight-lipped. They gave him antihistamines, monitored his vitals, said we caught it in time, but I'd never felt so behind. I sat by his bed while he slept, watched his chest rise and fall, watched the IV drip, watched the clock. The tablet sat on my lap, still warm from use, still full of things no child should have needed to collect. I didn't cry. I recorded a statement, wrote down everything I'd seen, date, time, voice lines, reactions. Then I called my lawyer, Cecily Brandt, sharp, quiet, relentless. I'm ready, I said. She didn't ask for what. She already knew. 2 days later, I filed a formal request for investigation with Child Protective Services. 3 days later, Francesca was served papers. Request for no contact, emergency restriction, temporary custody orders. She responded with fire, accused me of manipulation, claimed Jonas had been coached, said the recordings were out of context. But the files had timestamps, layered consistency, emotional tone you couldn't fake. I submitted the full folder to the family court magistrate, redacted names, unedited sound. The court ordered an emergency hearing, closed session. I wasn't allowed to bring Jonas, but I brought the tablet and the USB and the drawing of the clock Jonas had made red hand frozen at 6:12. Francesca wore pearl earrings, pressed blazer, like she was going to a luncheon. When the judge asked if I had something to present, I didn't speak. I played the tape. The entire room stilled. Her voice sharp like a slap. You think silence makes you innocent, it makes you forgettable. The room went colder with every word. Then the line, I don't care what your mother says. You're not special. You're a glitch. I paused it. The judge raised her hand, asked to hear the rest. So I played the last one, the newest, her laugh, the cookie. The line, "A little fear never killed anyone." And then, the softest voice in the room, "Jonas, I'm scared." When the audio ended, the silence didn't, not for a long while. Then the judge leaned forward and said, "This is not discipline, this is psychological abuse." Francesca opened her mouth to object, then closed it. For the first time, she looked old. The order was signed the same day. Restraining, medical disclosure, full guardianship rights reaffirmed. Custody locked to me. But that wasn't the part that mattered most. The part that mattered was when Jonas found out. I came home from court. He was sitting on the couch, wrapped in the same hoodie, tablet on his lap. He looked up, didn't speak. I sat beside him, held out the court order. He didn't take it. "Is it over?" he asked. I nodded. "She can't come near you again." He blinked. Not relief, not joy, just stillness. Then, "Do you believe me now?" I took a breath. "No," I said. "I believed you then. I just didn't believe me. That broke something." He leaned into my side, buried his face, didn't cry, just breathed. And for the first time in weeks, the hum came back, soft, steady, barely audible, but there. In the days after Francesca tried to reach out, sent one email I was only trying to make him strong, I didn't respond. Strength doesn't look like silence, it looks like survival. Jonas started therapy, the kind where kids draw and build and rebuild trust and color. He stopped recording, started writing instead. One night he handed me a folded paper. I opened it. Inside a single sentence. "I didn't just record what she said. I recorded how you didn't leave. I carry that line with me everywhere." Francesca left town. Some say she went to stay with her sister. Others say she moved in with a cousin out in Maine. I don't ask. Because I don't need to know where she is. I know where Jonas is. He's safe. He's present. And when Sunday comes, we still eat dinner. But now he picks the meal, plays music in the background, and sometimes he even hums out loud. No more silence. Only signals, only sound. People ask why I didn't go to the police. The answer is simple. Because I didn't want justice to be loud. I wanted it to be permanent. Francesca didn't go to jail. She didn't need to. What she lost was power. And for someone like her, that was a life sentence. Jonas never asked to press charges. He never said he hated her. He just stopped drawing clocks, stopped waiting for the red hand to move. He started sleeping through the night, started joining me in the kitchen, started choosing peace over proof. He still carries the tablet, not for recording, but for stories. Fictional ones, aliens and explorers and kids who outsmart monsters with glowing eyes. He's rebuilding himself in pieces. And I'm finally letting go of the silence I mistook for peace. I thought protecting my child meant shielding him from hard truths. But sometimes protection means believing the truth, even when it points at someone you love. Especially then. I still hear Francesca's voice sometimes, not in person, just in memory. Sharp, sarcastic, authoritative, but it no longer controls me. It echoes and disappears. That's the thing about sound. You can record it, play it, replay it. But once it's faced, it loses its sting. Last week, Jonas brought me a cup of tea before bed, chamomile, with a note under the saucer. Just 3 words. "Still here, Mom." That was all I needed. He doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't need to perform strength. He just needs to know that when his voice trembles, it will still be heard, even if it's only a whisper. Even if it's in the middle of Sunday dinner, even if the whole table goes quiet and stays that way. So now I ask you, if your child said something that made no sense to anyone else, Would you believe them? Would you press play? Would you stay? Or would you walk away? Tell me. What would Reddit say? There was a night, right before everything fell apart, when I almost deleted the folder. Beta 3. I sat at the kitchen table, the tablet in front of me, my finger hovering over the file. Delete, confirm. It would have taken 2 taps. The thought looped in my head, if I erase this, if I just pretend it didn't happen, maybe Jonas will forget too. Maybe we can both breathe again. The house was dark, dishwasher humming, wind slipping under the door frame. Jonas was asleep upstairs. I'd checked twice. But I couldn't sleep, because in my head, I kept hearing her voice. You think you're helping him, you're making him soft. Then his voice fragile, daring to exist. I'm scared. The weight of those words made me want to crush the evidence, like it would crush the memories, but something made me pause. I picked up his sketchbook, the one he always left next to his bed, flipped through page after page, clock hands, house shadows, a boy curled in corners. Then tucked between 2 drawings, a page I hadn't seen, his handwriting, not neat but deliberate. Pain unspoken is pain that stays. No signature, no context. Just that. I set the tablet down and cried, silent, not because I was breaking, but because I realized so was he, quietly, every Sunday. Deleting that folder wouldn't save him. It would bury him. I pressed the power button, set the tablet aside, wrapped his sketchbook in a scarf, put both inside the locked cabinet by my bed. Then I stood at his door, listened to his breathing. Soft, steady, trusting. I didn't delete the files. I wrote my own instead. 1 sentence, on the back of an old grocery receipt. Yeah, you're not broken, you're brave. I slipped it into his hoodie pocket, zipped it shut, let it rest there. Next Sunday, when he got dressed, he didn't say anything. But I watched his shoulders straighten, and I knew he'd found the note, and I knew he'd saved mine too. The school called on a Thursday afternoon. It wasn't the nurse, it wasn't the principal. It was his language arts teacher, Ms. Harmon, polite, always wore long sleeves and soft shoes. Hi, Ms. Lee. I wanted to check in about Jonas's latest project. My throat tightened. Did something happen? She hesitated. Well, he didn't turn in the writing assignment. At least, not in writing. What did he turn in? She cleared her throat. A file, an audio file. My pulse slowed. What did it say? She paused again. Then softly, I think you should listen to it yourself. I drove to the school after my shift. The sun was setting. The hallway smelled like whiteboard cleaner and fear. She met me outside the classroom. He titled it, What It Feels Like When They Don't See You. She handed me a USB and an envelope. Inside a permission slip he'd filled out. In the comment section, 1 sentence. Sometimes the words don't fit in my hand, so I speak them instead. I took it home, locked my bedroom door, plugged it into my laptop. His voice filled the room, steady, low, no music, just sound. Sometimes, I disappear while sitting right in front of them. Pause. She passes food like it's control. If I flinch, I lose. If I chew too fast, she wins. Pause. She says I breathe too loud. That silence is the only safe way to exist. But then she yells when I stop speaking. Long pause. School is where I go to feel invisible. On purpose. Click. The file ended. I sat frozen, fingers clenched on the keyboard, breath caught. I emailed Ms. Harmon that night, thanked her, asked if Jonas had spoken about it. She replied 5 minutes later. He told me you already knew, that you just needed someone else to hear it too. The next day, Ms. Harmon asked the school counselor to follow up. I signed every form, opened every gate, but even the counselor said Jonas is very intelligent. Maybe he just feels things more intensely. Some kids are wired that way. I didn't argue, because they weren't wrong. They just weren't enough. Feeling things deeply isn't a flaw, it's a signal, one that had been blinking red for months. And no one noticed, except the boy himself. So I listened. Harder. It was almost midnight when I found it. I wasn't searching, just trying to free up space on Jonas's tablet. The therapy app was crashing again, and I thought maybe it needed more memory. That's when I saw it. A small untitled file, no folder, no timestamp, just hidden deep inside the system storage. Invoice 02 untagged. I hesitated. Most of his recordings were deliberate, labeled, strategic, but this felt like something private, like a message he recorded not for anyone but for himself. I tapped play anyway. At first nothing, just silence, a soft inhale, a long exhale, the kind you take when no one's around. Then his voice, unpolished, unplanned, younger somehow. I don't think she sees it yet, or maybe she does, but she's scared of what it means. My heart clenched. I know she's trying. She packs my lunches with little sticky notes, smiles harder when I look tired, pretends not to notice when I cry into my hoodie. A pause. But sometimes I think she wants to believe more than she wants to know. My hand covered my mouth. She's not cruel, she's just afraid that if she believes me, she'll have to stop loving the person she believed in first. Francesca. I don't blame her. She's been quiet her whole life. Not because she doesn't feel, but because no one ever stayed when she spoke. The silence stretched. Then his voice came back. I guess I just wanted to know, if I disappeared, would she look for me in the right places? Another pause. If she finds this, it means she stayed. I sat frozen. That line, it means she stayed, cut through everything. Because he wasn't testing my trust. He was testing whether I was worth his. And I almost hadn't been. I didn't tell him I heard the file, didn't mention it, didn't print it, didn't save it under a new name. I just changed. I started showing up differently. Not just physically, emotionally, energetically. I sat closer at dinner. I let him choose the music. I didn't correct his posture when he slouched. I stopped asking, "Are you okay?" and started saying, "I'm here when you're ready." 2 weeks later, he slid his tablet toward me. New folder, titled Rebuild. Inside were ambient sound loops, rain, crickets, slow piano keys. At the bottom, one file, no label, just this: "If you're still listening, thank you." I didn't cry. I pressed play, sat back, closed my eyes, and let the sound of my son's voice, strong and unhidden, fill the room that used to echo with silence. That was our story. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it mattered. Because sometimes the quietest voices carry the deepest truths. And sometimes the strongest thing a child can do is press record. If this story made you feel something, tell me, have you ever been in a moment where no one believed what you knew to be real? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about it.